I think it's always great for us as a legislature to offer generous benefits to employees all across the state. And it's very popular with the employees who are receiving the generous benefits. But I think we need to be very careful that we don't put ourselves in a situation where we punish those employers who are already providing this leave. And in this bill, the language is clear. If you're an employer and you already provide 12 weeks, you now provide 24 weeks. Your employees who are having kids can take 6 months off, nearly 6 months off every year to take care of their kids, not just their own, but their stepchildren. And the cost of that has to be substantial. I agree with my colleague. We need to raise the amount that's been paid. It's been since 1989 when I had dark hair. I'm delighted I still have any. But we do need to raise it. But we raise it by 370% in 5 years. And we need to be sensitive to what that does to our economy. Sadly, New York State does not have a reputation for being business friendly. We don't have a reputation of being low tax or low regulation. And so the incremental impact of adding nearly 3 months of paid leave to an entire family is significant. And my concern is it will have a very serious negative impact on our employment. When we look at this from a fairness perspective, this bill calls for all employees to contribute a fixed amount each week. But the benefit is not based on a flat amount coming back. It's based on a percentage of their income. So what they pay is not based on a percentage of the income. It's a flat rate. But what they get back is a percentage of their income. And that's substantial because we have income ranges in New York State that run from a low of about $700 a week to over $1,800 a week. And so what that means is all of our less wealthy earners in this state will be subsidizing the high-income earners in the state. Think about that. This system has a regressive tax payment, and as a result, your low-wage earners are subsidizing the benefit from high-wage earners. That's a novel approach for this assembly to take. So I think we do need to step back a little bit and take a look at this. I think we need to say that if you're an employer and you already provide 12 weeks of paid family leave, God bless you. Keep up the great work. We're not going to impose another 12 on you, and this language does. I think we need to take a balanced approach. We need to say we're going to have an advisory council, and half the members ought to be employers, and the other half ought to represent employees. So we have a balanced approach. I think we need to go back to our public sector employers and say, you know what? We believe in the collective bargaining process. That's what we believe in. That's why we're not imposing on this unless both sides agree. There's no collective bargaining when you just say one side can unilaterally impose it, but that's what this bill does. I appreciate the desire to provide more benefits and more flexibility. And I appreciate the desire to raise these rates. But I think we need to do more work before we move on this legislation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for your indulgence, and my colleagues as well.
Thank you, Mr. Goodell. Mr. McDonough.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the sponsor yield, please, just for one or two
Will you
questions?
yield, Ms. Nolan?
Yes, I'd be happy to. And I just would say, Mr. McDonough, I didn't get a chance to ask our colleague, but, the word benefit here, I think, is to call this a benefit is, in my opinion, not correct. This is an important step forward for families that people will be paying for through insurance. That's different than a handout. This is not a handout. This is not a benefit in that way. This is something that people who are working New Yorkers will be paying for, their employer will be purchasing, that will allow them to use time with their families and come back a better worker. Thank you, Mr. McDonough. I don't want to take any more of your time.
And Mr. McDonough, we'll give you that time back.
Oh, good. I won't need it. Thank you, Kathy.
Mr. Goodell sat down a little too quick.
I'm a little confused on, perhaps I am confused on a point. Does this renew each year? If the employees, let's say it's a wife situation, and stays home for family care for the newborn, each year, can he do a new 12 weeks for that same child?
Yes.
So in other words,
Right.
this could happen.
Right. No, we understand that. Yes. Go ahead, Mr. McDonough.
This
Yes.
could happen every year for, let's say, the first 5 years of a child's life, right?
Well, if the child is not. Yeah, yes. Not for newborn. The reason our councils are talking here is that obviously a newborn, healthy baby, you get 12 weeks. You don't get 12 weeks going forward, only if there's an illness. But if there's a
that's-
serious
okay.
illness,
All right.
you would want to
But
take
it
that.
does renew. It doesn't have to be a different, it would be the same
Right,
child.
a healthy 2-year-old, you're not going to get another 12 weeks. Does that
Right,
answer it
okay.
more concise? I try to be, concise when I do it. So
Based on medical needs, so to speak, right? The other question or remark that I have, I noticed in the bill, it says that the employee shall make reasonable effort to schedule intermittent or reduced leave so as not to unduly disrupt the operations of the employer. How do we enforce that? Who makes that decision? That the employee is going to say, well, I'll make reasonable arrangements, maybe not to take the full 12 weeks because I know it'll be a burden on you to replace me, but another guy might say, I'm going to take the whole 12 weeks because I'm entitled to it. How do we enforce that employee to say, yes, I'm going to do the best I can?
we don't expect there to be a lot of grievances. The emphasis in the bill is to work it out so that if, for example, you want to use leave intermittently and you go to your employer and you say, look, I really need the next 10 Fridays because my child has to go, God forbid, for some treatment. I suppose, employers will have an ability to say, no, we need you. You're in a crucial position. It would go then to this board that we're talking about, which we're going to make sure has some private sector input. But I really don't expect a lot of that because the push in the language is to work it out. The employee cannot dictate to the employer, well, I want to take this leave, I'm taking this leave, and you have to take me back. Like, that's not the scenario we're talking about here. We're talking about my mother has, God forbid, cancer, my child is sick, my spouse is dying, I need some time. I will come back, I will be a better employee when I come back because I will have had that time. So that's the kind of, scenario we envision. If there are things we need to do to toughen up the language because people are concerned that the employee has some nebulous unilateral power that we don't agree, but, I'm always open to that. We're happy to make it as tight as possible, but we envision a scenario where things will be worked out between employer and employee.
Okay. Thank you very much, Kathy.
Thank you.
Ms. Nolan to close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, my colleagues. And I want to thank my colleagues because I do get strong about what I believe in, but I very much appreciate your comments because it does give us a better bill to negotiate with the governor and the Senate. And we did try in this legislation to reflect concerns that have come up over the last 15 years. How can we strengthen our families in the most cost-effective way is really that's what this place is about. It's about competing priorities and competing interests, all of which have some value, right? We want our employers to be strong, but we want our families to be strong as well. And I just want to point out that this bill contains what we feel are 5 essential components that we think give it more strength in the negotiations with the second floor, with the executive, and with our colleagues in the Senate. And we do have a Senate sponsor for this actual language in Senator Dabo. So we got a live bill here that is working its way. There is some language in the budget. We have a chance, colleagues, to sort of maybe even redeem ourselves a little bit in the eyes of the public by reminding the people that sent us here that we do listen to them, that we hear them, that when they have concerns, we respond in creative and innovative ways. This bill contains 12 weeks of leave to care for a new child or a seriously ill family member. It has job protection throughout the leave. It has coverage for all private sector workers, like the temporary disability insurance that dates to 1949. All employers purchase that insurance, so it is not an undue burden on small businesses. We have a wage replacement rate of 2/3 of the worker's average weekly wage, which will ensure that low-wage workers are not prohibited from taking the leave. And we will modernize the temporary disability insurance program that covers the worker's own illness or job disability because it has been frozen at a level of $170 a week since 1989. We can do better, colleagues, for people in our state who are injured. We can do better, colleagues, for people in our state who need to take care of a sick child or a dying spouse. We can do better, colleagues, to strengthen our employers so that they have the kind of educated, smart, satisfied workforce, loyal workforce that allows them to compete in the global economy. I just want to end with a little quote from the great First Lady, former First Lady of New York, as well as First Lady of the nation, Eleanor Roosevelt. In one of the speeches she gave, talking about family life, we're talking about family life here, the love of a child, the love of a spouse. What matters now, as always, is not what we can't do. It is what we can and must do. Colleagues, I am grateful to Speaker Hasty for supporting this bill. I'm grateful to our wonderful staff, which has worked so hard to answer those questions. I'm grateful to all of you who came to our conference today who have worked so hard on this. Colleagues, we can and must pass paid family leave this session. We can and must treat people who are disabled better than we do, and we can and must pass this bill today. So thank you, Mr. Speaker, and my colleagues. I'm very confident that we will do so today. Thank you.
Read the last section.
This act shall take effect immediately.
The clerk will record the vote. Mr. Morelli.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I understand that Ms. Glick wishes to have an opportunity to explain her vote, but I do want members of the Higher Education Committee to cast their votes here on this roll call and then make their way to the Speaker's conference room so we can conduct that piece of business, and Ms. Glick will be following directly after her comments. So members of Higher Ed in the Speaker's conference room.
Higher Ed in the Speaker's conference after Ms. Glick explains her vote, a very organized way. Ms. Glick to explain her vote.
Thank you very much for accommodating me early in the list. I want to thank the Speaker and the sponsor of the bill, not just for the legislation, but the spirited debate that pointed out the crucial nature of this. There are always concerns that people are going to somehow game the system. But this is when people's family members are ill, and people don't generally make up a seriously ill family member, especially when it is going to, the enforcement mechanism is that you're not getting a full paycheck. You're not getting a full paycheck, and most New Yorkers are living paycheck to paycheck. This is a small compensation so that people can take care of a family member who is ill. Many of us, unfortunately, have had that experience with either an ill parent or sibling or child, and one cannot do a good job. One cannot have the stress involved with serious illness and still be an efficient and fully functioning employee. So it's a benefit to the employer. It is about New York as a humane state, and it is about ensuring that the basic enforcement is that people really can't afford not to be getting a full paycheck by and large. They're only doing this when they really have to. And so I withdraw my request and vote in the affirmative.
Ms. Glick in the affirmative. Ms. Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank my colleagues and, of course, our Speaker for allowing the Assembly to once again take this crucial step towards securing paid family leave for all hardworking New Yorkers, a protection that would be monumental for businesses and their employees. New York State Assembly has long held the commitment to protecting not only families, but also the heart and soul of our economy, which is New York's workforce. And I believe that this paid family leave proposal does just that. Today, workers are fulfilling a variety of roles in their families. They face the challenges of raising their children, paying the bills, and now more than ever, taking care of an aging parent. Grown children have become the single greatest source of care for our parents. The proposal also reflects the Assembly's continued commitment to protecting the rights of women in New York. As women have become a more powerful force in the workplace, their workload as caregivers has not lightened. This bill would prevent women from having to choose between putting food on the table and caring for an aging parent or newborn child, a decision no one should ever be forced to make. And for these reasons, I urge this legislative body to support this vital bill. Paid family leave makes sense for everyone. New York families should not have to choose between caring for a sick loved one or financial ruin. And businesses should not have to lose valuable employees who need time to care for those loved ones. Thank you.
Ms. Titus in the affirmative. Ms. Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I, too, rise to explain my vote, but I'd like to also begin by thanking the sponsor of this bill and the Speaker for ensuring that we are actively debating these types of issues. You know, as part of the debate bore out today, this really isn't a new concept in New York. The problem is that we have not updated, our policies in regard to this issue for most of my lifetime, which is pretty sad that I'm standing here. And for most of my lifetime, this essentially insurance benefit has been frozen in time and really doing a disservice and not working as it was originally intended. This is an adjustment. It's an update to something that has our values in New York, I think, have long supported, but it just hasn't kept pace with the cost of living, with where we are today as a society. I think it strikes the right balance of financial responsibility, ensuring that the worker is part of this scenario. And actually, who knows, when they run the numbers, it might actually be the worker that bears the brunt of the increased cost, at least in the first several years. But I think it also provides some flexibility that the business community can embrace, that being able to take intermittent leave and having the ability to sit down and talk about how the worker is still going to be able to be engaged in the workload. And perhaps they won't have to hire an additional employee for those 12 weeks of time because they're going to be able to work out the logistics, employee to employer, which I think is a flexibility that our employers are really looking forward to, and sanity and a human approach for those that are struggling with a sick one at home. I am very proud to be able to stand here, not to talk about supporting a brand new kind of, progressive idea, but to stand firm in our commitment to this type of program that we've had in this state, but to understand that we have to make these updates to really reflect the reality that's going on for both our business community and our workers. I withdraw my request and vote in the affirmative.
Ms. Russell in the affirmative. Ms. Bichette.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to certainly thank the Speaker and the sponsor of the bill for reintroducing this issue, to have a vote on the floor, and as well to debate the very details of it. I rise today in support of this bill on paid family leave, which truly promotes good family values. I may not be a mother as of yet, but I do have a mother. I may not be a dependent, but I'm still a daughter of a mother of whom I had to leave Chicago 10 years ago to come and be by her side. And she suffered health conditions for a very long time. When I worked on Wall Street, it was very difficult to to take care of my mother because I was not allowed. It was devastating. And so I had to make a decision. I eventually left, and I went on unemployment insurance. I must say that the foundation of the success of mankind and womankind is dependent on the family unit. Paid family leave permits dads to stay home with their child who is sick. It also allows a grandson to stay home to take care of their ailing grandmother or grandparent. In the same way, I, as a daughter, had to stay home to take care of my ailing mother. This bill promotes what propels us forward as a species, which is to ensure that the family units stay together. I ask my colleagues to vote yes on this bill, which supports the unity of New York's family units. Thank you.
Ms. Bichette in the affirmative. Mr. Steck, Philip Steck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The opposition to this bill reminds me of the old Groucho Marx line, whatever it is, I'm against it. We have many successful economies all over the world, such as Germany, a leading economy in the world, that have had programs like this for a long time, and I don't see why we can't do it. And speaking from the standpoint of a small businessman, we had one employee who went out 1 year for 3 months for heart surgery. The next year only worked 47% of all work days and nonetheless was paid in full by our firm for all that time except for 4 or 3 weeks when she was totally disabled and then paid half time. So we would have benefited greatly as an employer from this legislation. I think this legislation is a good thing for employers if they just sit back and give it a chance. Thank you.
Mr. Philip Steck in the affirmative. Mr. Buckwall.
This paid family leave bill, last year I did not vote for the bill. The reason I didn't vote for the bill is that I wasn't in Albany that week. I was home because my wife had just given birth to our first daughter. I was able to be home with confidence that I could do best for my family and not affect my paycheck. My wife was able to be home and to be on maternity leave because she had an employer that provides paid maternity leave. That situation should be far more the case across this great state of New York. And so I'm very proud to be here today in Albany and to thank Ms. Nolan for bringing this bill forward. I proudly vote in the affirmative, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Buckwall in the affirmative. Mr. Brunson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To explain my vote, today New York State takes a step forward to protect and support our families of New York State, families who work tirelessly each day, each week, each month, each year, so that they can provide for their family, provide for their children, provide for their spouses, provide for their parents. This is what we are as New Yorkers. We support our families. The Assembly today is supporting our families. The Assembly today is saying no one in New York State should have to choose between nursing an ill family member back to health, bonding with a newborn child or adopted child, or taking care of someone in their last remaining days, and make that choice to go to work or to provide for their family. We say you should have the ability to choose your family first. It is amazing that the United States is the only industrialized country in the world that does not provide paid family leave. We need to change that today, and we need to move forward to protect our families. I proudly vote for the families of New York, and with that, I withdraw my request and vote in the affirmative.
Mr. Bronson, in the affirmative. Mr. DiPietro.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I love hearing people talk about the family, and about young children who get sick. I just want to point out the hypocrisy that this board, or this body, votes for full-term abortion. Total hypocrisy. I vote in the negative, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. DiPietro in the negative. Ms. Solange.
I'd first like to thank the sponsor and the speaker for allowing this piece of legislation to come onto the floor. Just last year, I had the beautiful blessing of bringing a child into this world. And an added blessing was having women come up to me and share their concerns and their advice. And I was struck and overwhelmed by how many women didn't talk about, having the responsibility of a child, but how they're going to pay for it, and how that they had to choose between a paycheck and staying home with their child for the first 6 weeks. And so we are passing a piece of legislation that's so important, that is essential, because I've heard too many stories of women who went back to work for only after a couple of weeks of giving birth for fear that they were not going to make ends meet. And still others who had to leave the workplace entirely because the cost of childcare was greater than what they were earning. So I urge my colleagues to support this legislation, and I vote in the affirmative.
Ms. Solange in the affirmative. Ms. Richardson.
Good afternoon, and thank you. I want to commend the sponsor of this bill and also the speaker. And I want to say that today in the Assembly, we stand to do the right thing. Paid family leave is the right thing to do. It's not a progressive thing to do. It is the right thing to do. I am a mother. I am a daughter. I am a sister. And if something should happen to one of my family members, I don't want to have to choose between keeping my job and caring for a family member. I'm an assemblywoman. Yes, I'm standing here now. But just yesterday, my son, I got a call from the school. My son has wingworm right now in his head. He had to leave. Luckily, I have people that help me, right? So I'm still here. But what if I was working in a job where I didn't have any sick days? And I would have had to choose between taking my child to the doctor and caring for him or earning money to take care of my family. So I want to say that this bill is going to help so many people across the state. Praise the Lord that in New York City, our mayor has already gone far and beyond to ensure that this is a reality. And now we are going to support the rest of the state in helping you to do the right thing. Any opposition to this bill, you need a mirror. Look at yourself and your reflection and know that you represent not only your district, but so many millions of people across the great state of New York. And with that, I vote in the affirmative. Thank you.
Ms. Richardson in the affirmative. Mr. Crespo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also rise to commend the sponsor of this bill and to encourage a yes vote. You know, a lot of us make decisions that we oftentimes clarify where our moral values stand. Well, this issue is no different. We can't call out folks for being so-called hypocritical when we talk about family values being important and then deny them the opportunity to be there for the loved ones when they need them most. When I was there for my daughter's birth, it's something my father could not do for me or for my brothers. And so, matter of fact, he had to send us away to Puerto Rico where family could look after my mother to be born there. So I understand that this has some implications that may cost the state or may cost some business. But to say that we are hypocritical or not, what I would ask you to be is consistent. And if you believe that families deserve to be there for the loved ones, to provide for them and not fear that everything they've worked towards is on the line at the time when their emotions are high, when things are stressful, when things are difficult, to deny them that is un-American. It's not New York-like. So for those reasons, for consistency, for families, for fairness, for justice, I vote yes.
Mr. Crespo in the affirmative. Ms. Mr. Linares.